I'd now like to bring in Carlos Sabah into the conversation. Carlos is president of the Intentional Leadership Institute, and he has more than 20 years working with organizations on global training and development programs throughout Central, South America, and Europe. Carlos is also involved in building TRACOM's international network. Carlos, what is your experience in how organizational and structural issues affect global training efforts?
My experience has been that organizations that include human resources as a component of their strategic element in the organization, they tend to do less errors when implementing training, any kind of training worldwide. Those organizations that do not include human resources as part of their strategic component, they seem to have significant problems. When I take a look at the strategic component of human resources, it is best to understand that there are two issues to take a look at. One is dealing with the task training, the what and the how, to create a global platform and tailor other programs dealing with interpersonal skills and people to adjust for the local culture. In other words, the why to. If collecting data for the how to is totally different than collecting data for the why to when dealing with the local culture, organizations need to pay specific attention to that. For instance, if you're doing a selection program in a particular part of the world, you may follow the structure that you want to do in terms of selection. But when it comes to local customs and specific issues that are dealing in that country for the selection, it is best to pay attention to what happens in that venue rather than following all the items that corporate would want to do. Another issue is the cross-coordination from corporate to local geographies. Local reality changes significantly depending on the country that you happen to be in. Problems that come up in the localities are usually because there is not an identification between corporate and the host country in terms of how they're doing things, which are critical to make sure that there is fluidity in the training program. This is what most organizations make a mistake. They create content in the organization and they decide to deploy that content in the same manner as if you were in the United States. And my advice is to go through great lengths to make sure that content is adapted significantly, especially in the people area, in the people training area, more than in the task area. I would say the task area could remain in its context and content about 80%, but when it comes to people skills, context should be probably remain the same, but content will probably change anywhere from a 60 to an 80%. For instance, a Fortune 500 company with offices in Spain did the translation of all the training content in the USA. As a result, the language in the host country was off. The meaning was lost. In addition, all the examples were left intact. No adaptations were made to reflect Spain's culture and customs. The employees resisted the training and a lot of money was wasted. Translations are best done in the host country, supervised by an employee of the company in the host country who understands corporate and the local operations.
Good advice, Carlos. Thank you for that. Back to you, David.
So now let's take a look at the challenges around content and culture. So for that, let me give the floor back over to Casey.
Thanks, David. The next challenge is high-quality content. And by definition here, we're talking about world-class content. There's all sorts of reasons for training. It could be leadership development, sales training, software skills, you name it. No matter what the purpose, you need to make sure that the content truly addresses your needs across all global locations. Now, this is an area where HR and training execs have expertise and experience. After all, you're the experts at understanding the business strategy and determining how training can make a difference. but there are some very unique challenges when developing content for locations around the world. First, you need to be clear on exactly what you're trying to achieve. This sounds obvious, but everything else flows out of this. Your organization may develop its own content. It might acquire content from outside vendors, or, as is often the case, you might use a hybrid of those two. Whatever it is, you need to communicate it throughout the organization and get support at the different locations. If it's merely seen as a directive from headquarters, it probably won't succeed. So enlisting local champions, if possible, is very important. These individuals can be really critical, not only for communication and logistical support, but also for helping develop the training content itself. People at the different locations will have very good insight into what things will work or not work at their sites. So collaborating with them will help ensure that the content is on target. It can be a real challenge to get together all the people and support for a global initiative, but this upfront work is truly critical. It helps ensure that the training can be repeated across time and locations. Of course, many of these challenges exist in single location training programs as well, but they're even greater in global initiatives. And where choosing or developing effective content used to be half a battle, now it's just a starting point.
Casey, I have a question. While we're talking about global training initiatives driven by corporate headquarters, I'm wondering how these efforts affect locally driven training.
That's a really good question, Sean. Well, sometimes there can be a conflict if a location has already implemented training that's similar or related in some way to the global initiative. The locations themselves might have a sense of ownership over their own training programs, and they might feel that headquarters is stepping on their toes. So the advice I have there is just to make every effort to cooperate and coordinate with the locales themselves, incorporate the best parts of their program with the global program, and once again, this will help increase your chances of success.
That's right, Casey. Let me just add something. In my experience, I've always found that people really support what they help to build. And when you think about crossing thousands of miles, multiple time zones, and all the cultural differences, that takes on an extra importance here when you're talking about rolling out global initiatives, especially if it's the first time that your organization has done this.